Hello, folks, and welcome back to Jolie's. Today we are going to be learning about how Thomas Pynchon described the creation of the internet by the CIA. Let's get into it.
What did Thomas Pynchon think of the internet? Well, today we are going to hear Pynchon connect the internet to the CIA, the misery that many of us are facing in our daily lives, and so much more. And I am super excited to kick off more Pynchon content because next month, Pynchon is going to be releasing a new novel, Shadow Ticket.
Oh, wow. I had no idea that Pynchon was still working at this point. I know he's beloved by many. I haven't read any of his books. Well, technically I've read Inherent Vice through listening to Inherent Vice through the Infinite Cast. And I just want to say, while individual parts could be genius and really fun to listen to, I wasn't overall overly impressed with that specific novel.
And if you don't already know, Right Conscious is the headquarters of everything related to Thomas Pynchon here on YouTube. If you look at the playlist down below, you will find videos on his books, his life, and his philosophy and outlook toward reality. And so,
probably more videos that we should be watching here in the near to distant future.
if you are interested in that, of course consider subscribing, but let us now hear from Pynchon. Yep, and your internet was their invention. This magical convenience that creeps now like a smell through the smallest details of our lives. The shopping, the housework, the homework, the taxes, absorbing our energy, eating up our precious time. And there's no innocence anywhere, never was. It was conceived in sin, the worst possible. As it kept growing, it never stopped carrying in its heart a bitter cold death wish for the planet. And don't think anything has changed, kid. And this is absolute fire and 100% correct by Pynchon, because one of the most impressive things that I've seen from Pynchon is that in his 70s, he wrote where this quote comes from, which is the novel Bleeding Edge, which came out in 2013. And
Wait. So he was in his 70s in 2013, so he's still alive, still publishing novels. So he has to be in his 80s doing this. This is crazy. I really need to go and look up a list of his books, because I thought he was the kind of writer who had written like 3 books. I guess I misunderstood his output. I think it must have changed at some point. I know Gravity's Rainbow is considered the one of those classics that is near impossible to read. And supposedly he kind of backed off of trying to write at that level and just tried to make stuff that was much more digestible from then on out.
And this novel dives deep into technology, the internet, the dot-com bust, coding, tech entrepreneurship, all these different things that you would think that a 70-year-old wouldn't be able to grasp. Because I remember when my grandparents were in their 70s and cell phones were coming out, they couldn't wrap their heads around even making a call on them, let alone sending text messages and something like that. And so the proficiency and depth and kind of the propheticness that Pynchon brings to the table in this is really crazy, and shows that from his first novel, V, to hopefully his last novel, or maybe not his last novel, Shadow Ticket, he continuously releases quality work that is pushing the envelope of transformative fiction. And so now let's talk about this quote. And so what Pynchon is referring to here is the U.S. military intelligence establishment at large. The Pentagon, the FBI, the CIA, ARPA,
yes,
DARPA, and all of their contractors. And their invention of ARPANET, which is kind of like the groundwork for what we now know as the internet. And so I wanted to start off.
I mean, it is definitely fascinating. I think this book might be up my alley, because that is the fact that the thing that we use all the time, that basically has become this new era of humanity, the internet, what you're watching me through, what allows me to communicate with as many people as I am. Basically, I don't want to say broadcasting. It's not quite there, though I would like to be through live streams. But the fact that he is, he's getting into it and going under the hood. And if there's one thing Thomas Pynchon definitely knows, it's his history and his history for sure. let's see. And he does his research.
Start off here because this is something that many modern authors are facing right now. So I've talked about before how Thomas Pynchon is the perfect author in the sense that he is living the ideal life that all of us wish we had. All of us wish that we could just write beautiful prose and dive deep into all our schizo ideas and somehow make it work and somehow make tens of millions of dollars from it and never have to do any interviews. We get to be social and hang out with all the cool people, but there are no photos of us. We're basically an anonymous person out in the world who's creating a massive amount of change. He is the transcendent ideal that all authors strive toward. But what's interesting now is that because we have fallen so off course in the publishing industry and because of the introduction of digital technology and so many other things, reading, or I should say serious reading, transformative reading and writing has kind of taken a serious decline. And we haven't kept up with other artistic mediums. And we don't need to get that deep into that. But as I've talked about in other videos, it's somewhat sad that the only way out of this post-literate conundrum that we find ourselves in is through using these digital technological tools that somewhat killed the internet in the first place. And now that people like Mark Zuckerberg have trained Meta AI with over 15 million books that are on Library Genesis, they are forcing our hands and making us play in their arena and kind of controlling the flow of not just technology, but the arts. Because let's just be honest here, getting all the boys together at the pub or at the coffee shop and creating a literary renaissance that way isn't really possible. And the only way it really is possible, you know, alongside some in-person stuff, of course, is through digital technology. And it sucks. And this connects back to what Pynchon...
That's interesting. I mostly wanted to check my mic. I have a new, if you couldn't tell, I have a new setup. So I mostly wanted to check and make sure my mic was still registering. But no, the idea of like the local revolution, like, you know, a whole bunch of people meeting in the right time and space, or specifically geographically centered revolution, seems like that's set sail with the internet. But the good thing is your boys don't have to all be, or the people who are doing this revolution don't all have to be in the same place at the same time. But the negative is that they will have to penetrate an algorithm that could, you know, just be tailored to go against them. So, like, yeah, just like coming out of nowhere, you know. But there's always been gatekeepers. I mean, there's publishers that stood in the way before, or you'd have to figure out some way of, you know, mass producing your writing in order to distribute it that outside the publishing industry, which was really hard. So I mean, it's not anything new. It's just different masters at the helm.
Pynchon is saying here that the internet was conceived in original sin. It was conceived by the intelligence agencies that were, you know, behind United Fruit, that were toppling and screwing with the Middle East and causing all the problems that we're still dealing with today, because they felt like in their little think tanks that still exist today that they could control all these dumb Arab people or these dumb Eastern European people or whatever. And this also taps into one of the main themes of Thomas Pynchon's work in Bleeding Edge, in V, in Inherent Vice, Gravity's Rainbow. Like, I almost name every single one of them, kind of exploring capitalism and many of its downfalls, because we can, you know, sit here and advocate for the free market and competition and all of that. But one of the key words in this first quote of many that we will be exploring is convenience. And as we've seen with Amazon and, I mean, just the shutting down of so many businesses, that Americans and really people at large across the world, for just the convenience, for slightly less effort or slightly less money, will be willing to let the monster into their house. And this crosses over to what Pynchon is talking.
I highly recommend, try your best to, I mean, it's so funny to think that like going to a store, even a chain store, would be considered buy local. But if you can, just for the sake of getting out into the community, when you need something, try to find a store in town to go get it from. I mean, obviously, the problem is, how should I say this? On a long enough timeline with all things like this, or at enough mass appeal, there is no advocacy that could stretch far enough to fight the masses. And he's right. It's like the amount, like we are programmed to want to get, take advantage of as much convenience or value as possible. And the closer the two are in harmony with each other, even better. So we're never, I'm going to say never, but I have this, I've recently thought of this saying, it's like, what's going to win, a few decades of propaganda or a few millennia of evolution in biology? And it's like, biology always wins in the long run, no matter how much propaganda you try to force down for people to act opposite their biology. So, yeah, it's an uphill battle, but you can try to do your part by not just ordering everything instantly from Amazon and trying to find some place to get it locally first.
Talking about it, when he says it was conceived in original sin, because in the Cold War, we gave up our actual freedom for the start of the technological surveillance control state that we are slowly kind of moving into today. And, with Patriot Act 1, Patriot Act 2, all these things, it slowly slipped away. And we'll kind of get into this more in a second, and because Pynchon kind of takes this idea further, but that's what he's talking about here. And it's interesting because, I don't know, let me know down in the comments below. Do you guys believe, here I talked about the literary renaissance having to use digital technology. Do you feel like we can alchemically transmute energy? That something that's conceived in original sin, that's built on this shoddy foundation, can we still save the building? Or do we have to totally restart? And if we totally have to restart, when it comes to the internet or the arts or all these things, where do we even hit the reset button on? And is it even possible? I would love to know your thoughts down below. This is like kind of one of the main things that I'm always thinking about. And so Pynchon's main...
I'm not going to say that it's impossible to restart, but I think that there's some, a concept called like natural monopolies. I feel like if you were to come out with a competitor to the internet at large, granted, it's going to take a lot less time to get to parity with the current internet than it took the current internet to get where it is today. But it's still going to take a lot of time. I would imagine. But you would be able to make a lot better decisions along the way that were hard fought, and sometimes didn't go the way that they should have in retrospect. So you do have that. You get that whole, like, we can do it again, but this time we can do it better. But what are you going to do? Like, piggyback off of the I guess this is where I would need an internet expert to sit down and talk to about this. Marquez Brownlee's, like, some of his more his staff does like documentaries about these things, and I would just assume that there has to be some, like, which part of the internet are we talking? The procedures and the protocols, or the fiber optics in the ground? I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to relay those fiber optics or lay a secondary track. You're going to have to piggyback off the fiber optics. So then you're talking about like a different protocol that goes over the same fiber optics. I guess like that's the big thing, is like where structurally does this take place? Or do we just siphon off a subsection of the internet? That would be the most likely scenario. And I think that's what we should all be doing. It's less like creating an alternate internet, and more like, taking the internet that we all have access to and just using it the way that we want to use it, instead of going through, various apps, not just going through Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, but actually going and creating discrete websites that you maintain and that your friends maintain, and that y'all all go out there and, entertain each other through your own websites and spread those, probably through Twitter and Facebook.
Character in this novel, Maxine, who is actually, I feel like, a continuation of his character from The Crying Lot of 49, Oedipus Mass. She responds to this, which is awesome, because many of your responses, I think, will sound similar to this. Maxine goes sorting among among semi-exploded kernels for what little popcorn is left. But history goes on, as you always like to remind us. The Cold War ended, right? The internet keeps evolving, away from the military into civilian. Nowadays, it's chat rooms, the World Wide Web, shopping online. The worst you can say is it's maybe getting a little commercialized. And look how it's empowered all these billions of people. The promise, the freedom. And the character who talked in the first quote responds, Ernie begins channel surfing, as if in annoyance. Call it freedom. It's based on control. Everybody connected together. Impossible anybody should get lost ever again. Take the next step. Connect it to these cell phones. You've got a total web of surveillance, inescapable. You remember in the comics in the Daily News, Dick Tracy's wrist radio? It will be everywhere. The rubles will all be begging to wear one. Handcuffs of the future. Terrific. What they dream about at the Pentagon. Worldwide martial law. And so Pynchon gives the reasonable response, like, we are now in control of the internet, right? And I feel like what Maxine is saying here was true, and we were on that trajectory, because something that I've said is that I feel like the golden age of the internet was the mid to late 2000s when everybody was creating their own website. So I am always promoting Substack here on my channel because I feel like it's the home of the literary renaissance. It is social media where the best readers and writers in the world are at. But
give me Substack audiobook version, and I'll probably I could probably glom onto that. Or maybe there should be a service for people to go and read your articles on Substack, and they get like a percentage of your revenue or something, like for a cut of your revenue. So that way you can have like audio versions of your articles, because I'm just such a modern person. I do most of my media or my consumption of things, media, thoughts, ideas, essays through my ears, and specifically because I can then be free to go on a walk or go and run errands. And so it's kind of like multitasking. I know that's probably not for the best for intellectual development, but it's probably better than me not doing any of it. So I would love to have a Substack in audiobook format.
It's unfortunate we got there, because I remember going to all these pages that sometimes were shoddily designed, and being a huge reader of blogs and listener of early podcasts or just audio lectures or video lectures, whatever they were, and having to sit down and create a web page added some friction to the table, but also added a ton of personality and autonomy to the process of releasing your art out into the world. But now with streaming services for music, with licensing, large licensing website services for the arts, with, Kindle Unlimited now, and obviously places like Substack and all this other stuff, kind of that solo model has faded away unless you are a big time driver, like unless you have a huge traffic source and can kind of drive everyone to your personal website where you're going to like monetize them or have them look at your stuff or whatever. And so we've kind of come full circle back to platforms like Substack that have private equity endorsements, like Spotify that is willing to push AI music that they've created on their algorithm to, jip other people. And like we could go on and on about all of that. But the arts, the internet is really not in people's hands anymore. And that's partially because we have lost lost any sense of tech literacy. I remember coming up, back in high school, and all of my friends, we all knew how to torrent. We all knew how to find files and do things and work on computers in general. And now many kids, I just quit my teaching job after 8 years, big announcement. There you guys go. Maybe I'll make a video on it. But many of my students are highly proficient on their phones, can do anything. They want to write essays on their phone. But almost all of my students at the start of the year can't write more than 40 words per minute on a keyboard. And I have to train them all year. Like when we have 10 minutes left in class and there's nothing to do, I make them type on the keyboard and play games and all that to get them better. But typing is just like level 1. Beyond that, there is an insane amount of knowledge in the tech space that has been consolidated by apps, by by these major corporations. And what that's doing is slowly eroding our freedom. And so when Maxine says, it's maybe getting a little bit commercialized, this novel was written, published in 2013, but it takes place in 2001. That's one of the best reasons to do it. It takes place in September 2001 in New York City. So it's Thomas Pynchon writing. So it's a really awesome novel. Yeah. And he doesn't take the main.
I wonder what happens in the book. I wonder if there's any major events that happen during this bleeding edge novel.
Mainstream approach to what happened. And this is so important to talk about because that is the power, being able to host your own content, being able to share it out to the world. And we were sold a lie that YouTube or whatever platform was the way to do it. And it somewhat is, but the entire platform is bogged down with a bunch of crap. I don't know how you got here, but many people won't get here. And it is hidden behind sensational content, entertaining content, sports, politics, all these other things. And so what these major corporations, what the government, what the intelligence agencies want us to be doing is what? Because it's class warfare. That's kind of one of the big things that Pynchon talks about. That's one of the big things that I advocate for on this channel. That's why I don't get into politics. That's why I talk about why I don't vote, because right now we're still stuck as a populace. And that's my job. I feel like as a online educator, our job is to wake up and to realize our position and not continuously be turned against each other. And Pynchon says, quote, and this is a great little pun by Pynchon. He's so good at these. Look at it. Every day more losers than users. Keyboards and screens turning into nothing but portals to websites for what management wants everybody addicted to. Shopping games, jerking off, streaming endless garbage. And my cat Griselda has joined us.
Let's just say I probably fall into two of those three camps when it comes to my internet usage. And I don't do much shopping online.
She was meowing outside of the room. This is 100% correct. We have a sports betting crisis happening in America. Happening in America right now.
If you're betting on sports on the internet, stop. They are not giving you the good bets, the good parlays. They are always going to be nudging you to take your money. We're just being fleeced. The working class is being fleeced by internet sport betting.
For the men, we have an online shopping retail therapy crisis happening right now for women. I had one of my ex-girlfriends, she made way too much money when she was young. She got some hookup job and was making 6 figures at 19 years old. And she had a boyfriend and they were planning before me, planning their future and trying to save money on all this. But she would go and spend, because, she had a really hard life before this, $4,000 or $5,000 online shopping, but the boyfriend would get mad because he was putting his money into savings. And so she would hide it. She would hide it in the attic and all these weird places. We have a porn addiction epidemic happening in America. I don't necessarily care or even need to get into the morality of porn and all this stuff, but it is not good for your brain. Go read Your Brain on Porn by Gary Wilson. Learn about dopamine systems. It is not good for you. I'm not saying that sex isn't good for you or something like that, or masturbation is bad for you, but choosing to whack it, 3 days of the 3 times a day.
No, those are young man numbers right there, buddy. I don't think I've done that maybe in the last 3 months. I might have had a three plus times a day. Anyways, that's not for this channel. There's an epidemic out there, people. We need to worry about our young people. We're already forsaken. If you're over the age of 27, 28, your damage has been done. But we can help those youths.
Instead of actually going out into the world and, trying to find real connection is sad. And it's sad to not just watch it be happening to us, but across the world, to now older people, to even kids under the age of 6 or 7 who have access to technology, being shown, way too much violence, even worse, streaming endless garbage. Just total waste of time, because it's fun to do all those things. Let's be honest here. It's fun to shop for some stuff you don't need. It's fun to, I won't go there. It's all good. But the promise of the internet, this humanistic idea of the people awakening that was somewhat kind of, this idea was somewhat killed by all the totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, that we had these decently educated groups of people like the Italians, the Germans, the Russians, one could say even the Americans, and the Japanese and various other groups that just got totally, didn't use their education for good. Well, now we're in that real situation where we can independently find things. We don't have to be in the Goebbels propaganda machine or whatever. We get to, discern information, and we rejected that and be.
Oh, there's a chance we are in, a propaganda machine as devised from the learnings and teachings of Goebbels. He was effective. I'm sure some of his ideas have still been passed along. But, just like almost anything that's effective. I mean, I'm sure there's things that we still do from, because Genghis Khan sort of like established them. What I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's this idea of like, if it's this is going to be totally clipped out of context if I ever have an audience and somebody wants to tear me down. If there's this idea that if the Nazis did it, it was wrong and bad. And I will say, yes, they did eventually lead to, it did eventually lead to some of the worst things that have ever happened in the world. But they got to be able to do those worst things because they did things that were effective and, at the very least positive, and they could build upon, in terms of organizing their people and, disseminating information and, just doing things that almost any civilization that wants to kind of like tighten its belt and get down to business would be fools not to do. It's just that the ends were like so awful that retroactively, and this is so true for a lot of things. I feel like there's a video somewhere in this idea, but basically this idea that just because how things ended up was the ideas that things got to were so just like either corny or awful or whatever, that everything that led up to it was also bad. I jokingly kind of talked about this a few videos ago with the idea of like that skull measuring thing they used to do with the calipers or whatever. What is it called? Phlebotomy? Is that it? No. Phlebotomy is like modern day medicine stuff. Anyways, I think phrenology. That's it. And one of the arguments I was making was, I bet that for the time and the technology where that started out with, they probably had some things right about that idea. Like, probably they could probably, look at a mentally deficient person and then measure their head and probably find some correlation. It's just that it got to the point where it was being used to justify almost everything and explain away everybody and say, okay, every country in the world has, we are superior because our brains, our heads, our skull shapes are overall more, smart than every other country or something. And it's like, yeah, but it's like, it was probably good science that bad people or good science is, want to be careful with what I'm saying, but it was probably like there was probably some soundness to the science, and then other people came in and made it awful, and then the entire thing becomes a laughingstock, even if maybe some of the early discoveries were, like actually sound. I think that way about evolutionary biology. It's like evolutionary biology makes really good sense on, especially on face value, but it's only when you get to people trying to justify, like trying to get to the bottom of things like homosexuality and other things like that, that it's like, okay, guys, maybe we can't, this theory is just, we don't have the data to back everything up. It's just a really solid way of, thinking about about evolution. Anyways, let's get back into this video because I'm kind of out on a limb and about to fall.
And became more partisan, went into our echo chambers. And all it's doing is actually taking away our vitality, That's what jerking off does. That's what online betting does. You're addicted to the feeling of all these things. That's what streaming does. That's what shopping does. It's dissipating the power that we have as the people for something better. And this all connects to the real goal that, yes, we have this convenience now. Yes, we have the power. Yes, we can shine the light on these, terrible events that happen, or these atrocities, or things that would have been neglected before, like police brutality, or innocent people being harmed, corruption, whatever. But we're now in the control system, everybody. Your messages, your phone, all of it's being tracked. And yes, it's much easier to catch the murderer now. We can now track them and pinpoint their location. We live in, quote unquote, a safer world, but now we can't escape it. The internet and technology is one of the reasons why we've created this artificial monetary bubble that makes it hard to be able to live off the land anymore. The technology has created a method for impoverished countries all across the world to lift themselves up or live a more convenient lifestyle by giving up their rural lifestyle for living in like little apartments and being, support specialists or coders or personal assistants or whatever they are doing. But was that the best path to take? I've heard this before, like about Afghanistan, that these Afghani farmers who, are out there are looking, and, America and these other countries are telling them, hey, move into the city, work this job, you're going to work this weird technological job and do all this. And they're looking like, why would I leave my farm and go and do that? I'm not saying the Taliban shouldn't evolve, but we have been the promise that we are being made and the direction we're being taken down by, once again, a lot of the time, these corrupt groups isn't that good. And I think when we look at our society at large, when we are less healthy, less happy, and less intelligent than ever, and maybe not than ever, but in recent decades, even though we have more access to all the information that we need, and we have a technically bigger economy than ever, I don't know, man. And all it takes, we haven't necessarily experienced this in America yet, but China has been living through this, and they haven't really necessarily felt it as much because they've basically transitioned with the government they have now into this kind of control state. But all it takes, and it could be anybody. People love to talk about Trump, but we don't know when it's going to happen and who's going to do it. But they'll have a seemingly rational justification for turning that surveillance state, that control state, back on us. And when that happens, there's almost no way to escape. This isn't a science fiction novel. This isn't Rocky. This isn't Remember the Titans. Like, once you're locked in, once power has been consolidated and AI is tracking everyone, you know how hard it is to make change already, you guys? Like I said, we had this perfect opportunity in the mid 2000s and the early 2010s, and was the best thing that we did with that. Occupy Wall Street. We went through 2 senseless wars. I mean, we've been through so many senseless wars, but Iraq War 2, Iraq War 3. We screwed up Syria. We screwed up Afghanistan. We destabilized the entire Middle East, and everyone knows it, at least rational people. But we still elect on both sides of the aisle war hawks, peace through strength mentality people. And so to think that, and I'm using that as an analogy of we have these huge conflicts that people know we're bad, and people know that we have this kind of mentality, and we still haven't been able to shift something as easy as that we can all kind of decide on at the voter booth, that we know is immoral, that we know we can be like, yeah, I don't want my tax dollars going to bombs being dropped on kids wherever. And so to think as things get more locked down, that we'll have, because it shows up on our algorithm, more freedom to actually make change, it's insane. And that's where it heads eventually.
He brings up a great point. Like, it's I don't want to say it's now or never, but it's probably like now or not for another century. Something to that effect. It's like there's going to be there'll have to be like another massive like shoe to drop in order to shake things up now. And and let's face it, I have fun too. I like to have fun. I'm having some fun on Twitter. I'm actually getting a couple of posts that have like quite a bit of positive reactions. Please follow me at Twitter. I'm the Joel Watts, I believe, over there. Or I'm Joel. I think you can look up Jolie on Twitter if you want to hear me talk about like basically dating a trans woman and loving it. But besides that, but yeah, it's like you see how the freaking site works while you're on there, and it's an outrage machine, but it's an outrage machine that's meant for you to focus your outrage on anything else. Honestly, we should all just be journaling. Just pull out your journal and journal. That should be your primary way of entertaining yourself. And go buy a CD. Put it in a CD player. Listen to it that way, beginning to end. That's the true test of an album, of a band, of an artist. Can you like listen from track 1 all the way to the last track and love every single song, or tolerate every single song? Anyways, let's get back to this. He's bringing up a great point.
Eventually, when the technology gets good enough, they don't have to declare martial law. There doesn't have to be a revolution in the street. The Handmaid's Tale Sons of Jacob party doesn't need to take over or do anything. But everyone's just going to know that if you try anything, there's going to be a problem. And with the other big part with digital technology.
Hell, I mean, some may say, look at what happened post Charlie Kirk with the people who celebrated his death, and then them getting kind of outed, because a lot of those people who celebrated his death did it on their, like, you know, just full face, like, you know, no anime woman avatar with a fake name, screen name. It was like their real name, their real face on TikTok dancing and celebrating. Now, personally, I do think those folks were way out of line, and kind of, I'm not that upset about that specific example, but still the idea, like, you know, they let all of us say whatever we want, and then once we go too far, that's when that's when you get in trouble. It's like give you the freedom to fuck up.
Technology is that you can get framed for anything now. I mean, if you go watch a show like, if anyone ever saw The Wire, the greatest TV show of all time,
hell yeah, brother. I mean, I haven't watched The Sopranos all the way through, but I've heard that's like the other contender. But I can't imagine it. I have a hard time imagining something as about the entire system is going to, like, you know, it's like a personal drama versus like an epic, like a sprawling epic. So that's probably going to be my next big one, Sopranos.
There's a follow-up on it in, I think, 2022 called We Own This City, that shows like cops planting stuff, and it's based on a true story, like actual true story. And it's fucking crazy, you guys. But these dudes back in the mid 2000s and even up until like 2010 were just straight up planting evidence on people and taking all the cash and the drugs and all this stuff. And to think that, you know, that's changed overnight is insane. And to think that organizations that have done way worse things wouldn't and couldn't plant things on people's computers or whatever to send them away, to throw them into some conspiracy or say that they're doing something illegal, whatever that is, it's insane. And it's going to happen and keep happening more and more. And we won't be able to do anything, because how are we going to be able to question it? How are we going to be able, like all those mostly poor black men in Baltimore who had evidence planted on them, and they're in front of the judge and they're like, dude, you had 10 grams of cocaine on you. How are they going to prove otherwise until there's some big investigation? And so now I want to tell you guys about my Thomas Pynchon book club. Over on Substack, we read a Thomas Pynchon book every single month. This Friday, we are reading Vineland.
You have to admit, this is better than an ad for, like, I don't know, some watch company. Like, you know, it's better than it's not better than a shoe ad, because Shoe is reading the ads in hers, but, you know, he's actually advertising the thing he's doing. So listen up, Jolie viewers, fence sitters. Listen up, fence sitters.
This Saturday, we are going to be meeting and talking about Vineland, which actually has a movie coming out about it on Friday, adapted by Paul Thomas Anderson. So everybody go see that. Leonardo DiCaprio. It looks pretty good. Who knows if it will be good? Inherent Vice was pretty good, but this movie has a 3-hour runtime, so I'm hoping for the best. So we're talking about that this Saturday. Then next month in October, we are going to be talking about Thomas Pynchon's new novel, Shadow Ticket, as a group. We've already talked about 3 or 4 other novels, and then next year in 2026, we are going to tackle all the big ones: Against the Day, Mason and Dixon, and then Gravity's Rainbow, if I remember correctly. Those are the ones that we are going to have left. And so if you guys would like to go on that journey with me and read with the most active book club in the world, we read 6 to 10 books every single month and get access to my literature and writing courses.
When he said 6 to 10 books, I thought he was going to say every year. That is a lot of books. I don't know if I could read that fast. I could listen that fast. Times 2 speed.
live streams, a bunch of other content, then consider subscribing to me over on Substack. Like I just said, I quit my job and I'm trying to go full time. So each subscription literally means the world to me because I'm just eating into savings right now every single month, preying on a dream. Let's go. And so thank you guys for all the support. I hope you guys liked the video, and I will see each and every one of you very soon in the next video. One of Thomas Pynchon's most persistent themes.
I think we'll be watching more of Conscious videos. That was really good, and I do like that kind of links back to a, it links back to a book. It's like he's kind of give you like the kernels to make you want to read more. And I know he's been at this for a while. I don't know how long exactly. But I know that this is like a new phase for him. This whole, like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to quit my job. I just, I kind of had a feeling he was going all the way. Man, see, look, like just since then I watched his second latest, and then, yeah, he has 3 more books out, or not books, videos out. And like, can I see, like, can we scroll down? It's going to take a little while, I think, because it's going to have to hit every single one. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, he's been very proactive, very active. He also talks a lot about David Foster Wallace, which I'm a fan of. Yeah, so I would highly recommend this channel, and we'll probably be back here again. Anyways, thank you so much for watching another episode of Jolie's React. I'm hoping to do these more often. This setup is specifically so I can do this closer to once a day, crossing my fingers. Less post-production, more just get it in the can and put it out there. And then hopefully we'll be able to do scripted videos with editing and do it more like the other style with the green screen. But I just wanted to get back into this and reduce overhead, if you will. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and share with a friend. I would love to get more people in here. I've had some great comments on my last video, and I want to see more comments and more discussion coming out of my videos if possible, so we can sort of build a little community here, a community of fence sitters. That's going to be all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and enjoy yourself.